Now I move on to the to our session. So our session here is the role of accounting and finance, the function, accounting and finance function in a not-for-profit. Okay, that's our session, and we begin the session. Now, before we talk about, I'll just also want to lay out what an NPO is, and then go into what finance does in a not-for-profit. Okay, what is the accounting and finance function in a not-for-profit is what we are going to study now. So the when we work as a not-for-profit, what is our objective? Okay. Now, a for-profit, if you remember, whenever you talk to a for-profit person, or if you were doing something which was for-profit, what is the objective or motivation for the for-profit? It is profit maximization. Okay. So you will try to maximize your profit or maximize your earnings or returns as much as possible, is what is the objective of a not-for-profit, of a for profit. But when it comes to the objective or the purpose, okay, what is the purpose of an NPO? We are talking generically. Or the purpose of an NPO is basically maximizing social service, social impact, or social benefits for the community it serves or the beneficiaries it serves. Here also, there is maximization. Remember, but the maximization is not oriented towards profit. The maximization is oriented towards benefiting the community. And that is why we are different from for profit. So currently, if we understand we are different from for profit, and therefore we'll be given a different treatment in terms of a privilege when it comes to various laws, as long as we comply with them. Okay. So the question is not that we just get everything automatically, but we'll have to comply with conditions to be able to get those privileges. The privilege is because we are not maximizing profit, but we are maximizing social benefit. Now, social impact, social benefit, social service is, all these words are the same. The impact is something which is in terms of measurability. Okay, so you understand that today everything that we do and the way programming is changing is that if we are doing social work, the social work has to deliver a certain measurable or tangible result, which is the impact. Okay, now, this is the primary objective of an organization. However, there are secondary objectives when we want to maximize social impact. So we want to maximize social impact, that is a given, and you all understand that. But when we are doing maximization of social impact, how should we do it as our secondary objectives? Now here, the for-profit and not-for-profit differentiation collapses or goes away, because then we have to still apply the principles of business. Please remember, a not-for-profit is a social enterprise today. It is no longer that same CSO, SPO, NGO, NPO, nothing. If the way NPOs are evolving today, and you are seeing that, is that everything needs to be measured, everything needs to be estimated, everything needs to be measured whether we have met that estimation or not. And that is something also very common for the for profit. The for profit also works on the secondary objectives. We are on the same page. Now, there are three principles that I have laid down here in terms of our secondary objectives. Secondary objective means what we should do to achieve our primary objective. That primary objective is non-negotiable. We have to give benefit to the community. We have to change behavior. We have to change their mindset. We have to provide a certain service to them. We have to provide goods, social goods to them. Maybe goods can be also tangible goods. So it depends on what area you work in. That is immaterial. But at the end of the day, the beneficiaries are for whom we have to maximize. Okay, maximize. And there, three principles that also are applicable for profit is what we need to consider. Now, as long as you do not consider that, you will not be a good programmer also. Please remember this. So there are three principles or the three secondary objectives for meeting the primary objective are economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. These three E's that I have mentioned are the key pillars on the basis of which your organization will be considered different and will get money from donors versus other organizations which may not be able to deliver these three E's. Now, these three E's is also something which is practiced by for-profit organizations. First is economy. The economy means that when you are doing certain activity, who does that activity? Not finance people. Programmers do that activity. Communication people engage media agencies. Communication people engage consultants for messaging, for the design of messaging, design of various communication material. Who does that? You do that. Now, the concept of economy means that at the without compromising on quality, how can we get the lowest cost? So in a for-profit also, when they are looking for raw material, so for-profit looks at raw material, okay, because they have to then process it and make an output. If you want a computer to be manufactured, they have to buy raw material for making that computer. However, we are not doing computer, we are doing service delivery. But for service delivery also, we need to buy some raw material. It can be human resources, it could be program supplies, it could be goods and services, many of them. How do we buy those things at the lowest price? When I say lowest price, it doesn't mean that I'm talking of inferior quality. The same standard quality we can buy with a bandwidth or a price difference of 10 to 25%. How do we buy that product at the 10% rather than at 25% is the economy. And please remember, it's not only finance people. When I talk to communications people, the finance people don't understand the communications market. Okay. They don't understand. They don't understand the research market. You understand the research market. You understand the communications market. Therefore, you will have to advise the finance people and the management that this particular activity or particular product or service is something that we can buy at a lower price. Okay. And this is something that you have to uh, uh, help the program people. So that is what is called economy. Here we are working in the same fashion as for profit. Economy means without compromising on quality of what you are buying, can you get a lower price? What it will do, I'll tell you then. But if you can buy the same product at a lower price, sometimes we can buy, we are not GST registered, so we can buy from a composition dealer, and therefore the composition dealer might give us a lower price. Why not buy the same product? Same standard computer can be bought for 50,000 rupees and 55,000 rupees. Why should we not look at economy? The second is efficiency. Now, the efficiency means that with the raw material that you have purchased, whatever is your raw material for delivery of services, how do you process that raw material to get the output efficiently? So the efficiency means the process, doing the things right, doing things rightfully. So how do you use the minimum of resources to get that same amount of output is what is efficiency. This efficiency is a process indicator. It is conversion of input into output, and that is the process. So you can now please understand that whatever you do is first getting raw material and then converting that raw material into output. Why? That output finally is your service delivery, is your service delivery. But for that service delivery, you have to have a lot of inputs. Now, how do you get the inputs at the lowest price? Not compromising on quality. And how do you convert those inputs into outputs efficiently? For instance, you may have a planned journey cycle plan out that you have made for your subordinates. And can you reach the beneficiary in a much efficient manner by having, a much scientific planned journey cycle? Just one example that I'm saying, okay, is something that, we should sit down and think about it. Can with that same human resource, your foot soldier can we reach more persons through a more efficient process? This is nothing but finally affecting our finance and also affecting our service delivery. So please understand, what I'm trying to tell you is very important. Nobody will tell you this way. And if you are with me, you will understand sitting in your present position in program, what economy actually means. क्या हमको चीज लोअर कॉस्ट में लेनी है, बिकॉज फाइनेंस जो हमारे पास है फॉर आवर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज नॉट इनफाइनाइट. You all know that we are struggling for finance. But when we have this struggle, what are the things that always should be working? And these things should be working in your head automatically. Because at some point of time, these concepts, once they are in your mind, will help you work so automatically that you yourself will say, no, 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 this looks uh, expensive. Let's look for something more. And that you do in your personal life also. Why not give that to the organization? That the for profit fellow is supposed to do. For profit वाला अगर procurement करता है, उसको बोला जाता है, you have to, what is your KRA? Your KRA is to not compromise on the quality of the product, but in 1 year you have to bring down the input cost by 10%. That's his KRA. Is that our KRA? No, unfortunately not. Why? Because we are not into profit maximization, but we are a business enterprise. Let's understand that. And as long as we don't work like a business enterprise, I'm saying we are a enterprise. So we are not a profit making enterprise, but we are into the business of charitable work. That kind of an orientation we'll have to now change. People who are young, they need to bring that orientation if they have to work for the next 20 years in this or in this sector. Now, the efficiency is the process side of it, and the effectiveness is the output side of it. Okay. Output, not in terms of physical output or service delivered, how much service delivery was possible with the same input. Okay. And that means doing the right thing. Doing the right thing means maximizing impact. Now, if with X amount of budget, you said our impact will be to move our indicator from X to Y, have you, with the same financial resources, been able to do Y plus 1? Should you not do Y plus 1? You should try to do Y plus 1, because that is how you are going to maximize your contribution to the community. The donor did not say, if I have asked you in the log frame to do Y, you have to do only Y. You can do Y plus 1. And that will give you an advantage in the next cycle of funding with that same donor. That is what is called effectiveness. With respect to the objectives of the project, it is effectiveness also at the organization level. So today right now I'm talking about effectiveness for the project that you are working for. But sum total of all effectiveness in these projects is showing your organizational effectiveness. So your social impact or your social impact target, if it was whatever it was, okay, then if you do higher than that, that is what shows effectiveness. These are the three concepts that we have to understand and keep in mind. Economy, lower cost, efficiency, the process of converting your input that you have purchased into output. Even human resources is your input. Even travel is your input. Even program supplies is your input. Even fixed assets are your input. How do you use inputs to get better output? And better output will mean better effectiveness or efficacy of that particular project. Now that these three concepts, if you are able to embrace them, understand them, and practice them on a day-to-day basis, you will be a very successful programmer. Now all these three things have, if you are seeing between the lines, all these three things have financial implications. All these three things are finance related. Okay, so you are a finance person. All right, these guys in finance are not the ones who are doing this economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, but they are trying to bring that economy, efficiency, and effectiveness because you are not practicing it. Moving on, change the new norm for NPOs. Now, why I want to introduce this slide is before we do the main thing about finance function is there is a lot of churning that is happening in not-for-profit sector. And unless we catch up and understand and choose our actions and position ourselves accordingly, we are going to be we are going to perish or we are going to get marginalized. And that is why we need to understand. So while we have understood the objectives, primary and secondary objectives of an organization, which need to be delivered by you, we also need to understand what's happening in the ecosystem, in the development ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem, the change that is happening is donors' expectations are changing. Donors are not giving money for process. They are not saying buy this and deliver a certain process. That used to be the case earlier. We were process driven as far as donor funding is concerned, and we have got used to that so much that we think we have completed the process, the job is done. No, the donor expectation has now moved to effectiveness or impact. Please demonstrate through the process that you did what is the tangible result that has happened. Now, this is a donor expectation that is a complete change. And therefore, they are saying if I'm going to give you 1 rupee, I should be able to see what that 1 rupee did. I am prepared, and there are no new instruments that are coming in the marketplace where they'll say if you have done, if I've given you one, if you have done more than one, if you have done 1.5 rupees, I'll give you an incentive of 10 paisa also. So what I'm trying to say is that the donor's expectation from programming is completely changed. And therefore, you need to understand the language of finance. The second is statutory and regulatory landscape. Now, when you work in the field, you are taking a lot of decisions. And the decisions, the headquarter will come to know only after a certain point of time. Unless you understand the regulatory statutory landscape broadly, it is possible that your actions may be violating the statutes and regulations for that organization. Now, please understand that if there are violations in the statutes and regulatory landscape provisions now, the penalties are very, very strict. It can also mean that your organization may lose its existence. I know a lot of organizations where because in the field in FC with FC funds all here and there was done, then what has happened is that the Khamyazia has to be borne by the organization in terms of yesterday, day before, I was talking to ActionAid. ActionAid said that the field report by the Intelligence Bureau and the CBI says that the people in the field were not working within the framework of FCRA. So the people in the organization headquarters were not at fault, but the people who were working on the ground were not aware and they were not made aware of by the headquarters. That was their mistake of what the regulation was, and that they did not go beyond that regulation. Just as when we talk of our internal controls, we have a framework, we have our policies, we have to abide by those policies. Similarly, what is the regulatory framework is also changing very, very rapidly. And therefore, one of our session is around that to give you some orientation, right? So the regulatory framework is changing. The regulatory compliances are increasing because the government has noticed that we are not abiding by this, so that they have become stricter and stricter. To some extent, the mistake is ours. The third is the government orientation towards charity. Now, the government looks at charitable institutions as an enterprise, not as a charitable institution only. Second thing is that government says use charitable organizations just as business is done. But you are not into the business of profit, but you are in the business of impact. But the principles of business have to be actually followed. Is what is the government's orientation today? That is what needs to be clearly understood. So the government orientation towards charitable organization is not very lenient. Therefore, we have to be very careful. So those are the changes that are happening. And the last one that I want to tell you is technological development. So you might be noticing that there are a lot of changes in technology, and donors' expectations, government's expectation is also changing in terms of use of technology by not-for-profit. Use of technology can be both in programming, in finance, in other areas, in research, and the use of technology will bring about economy, will bring about efficiency and higher effectiveness. Now, are we looking at technological developments with the intention to embrace them? Is the big change which will decide which organizations will do better and which will not. Organizations which will take advantage of technology and therefore they will be able to scale it up. Technology is scalable and per unit cost of technology goes down as you scale up. Okay, then those organizations will be in a better position. So the government's orientation, the technological development, the statutory regulations, and donors' expectations are all changing. And therefore, we have to adjust ourselves according to these four major changes. Now, the changes are bringing risk, the changes are bringing opportunity. Okay, so there is a threat as well as an opportunity, both. So technology is a threat because it, ensures that people may get out of business. It ensures that they can replace people, but it is an opportunity to increase your size, increase your work, your operation, your geography very, very much, which is physically not possible. And number two is that the change is impacting organizations in terms of their future growth and sustainability. Now we will see what is sustainability and what is future growth. So the change has to be accepted. We need to understand the change and we need to actually work with those, work according to those changes for our long-term future. Very, very important. So we are not talking for today or for the next 2 years. People, 90 of you who have joined here are people who are going to have been in not-for-profits and are going to continue in not-for-profits. Understand these four changes that are happening and they are changing our way of working. You don't have to fight with anybody tomorrow and say, we have understood these changes and please work according to the change. I'm not asking you to do that in your organization. But I'm asking you to introspect, think about it, and say, well, these are the changes that will affect our organization's long-term future and also whether it will be sustainable or not. Now, moving on to what are the, let's move on from the changes to the resources that we use. Where did we talk about resources? We talked about resources in terms of economy. How do we get those resources economically? And then when we convert those resources into outputs, that's where we saw efficiency. Now there are three types of resources that not-for-profits use, and that's something that for-profits also use. One is material. Okay, so that is capital goods, program goods, supplies, technology. So all that is, something which is tangible, something which is both tangible and intangible. So software may be intangible, but that's also part of your capital goods. Your program goods are basically the goods that you are procuring for either delivery to the beneficiaries or being converted into outputs for the beneficiary. That is what the program goods are. The program goods can also be program related IEC material, material which you give to the community or to the beneficiaries for onward use for income generation, whatever it is. Supplies is also something that needs to be there for running those programs. Technology, as I had said, all hardware, software, AI, all that related is all your material. Now, the material is a resource and the material has been purchased. The second one is your financial resource. That is your money resource. This is the key resource that you have. Okay, so the money resource is, where does it come from? It comes from your donors, it comes from your operations, it may come also from some commercial activity or some service, consultancy service that you may get do, but that's how it is. Or you may also get money from interest, from your rent from your office, okay, for the office that you have created, for the interest that you have You have invested some money because that over the last 20 years, you had some corpus, you had some reserves, and that has been invested. So that is all money which helps you to buy these two things. One is material, and second is manpower. So we know that manpower and material is what drives our organization. People. So even people is a resource. Manpower is a resource for the organization. So understand that manpower also is procured. Manpower has to be paid. Material is procured. Material for material you'll have to pay. And money itself is a resource. So these are the resources that we have in an organization. The various business functions of an NPO, and you can see where you are. So finance and accounts is also a business function. So I've tried to put in these are the functions. And please remember, if we exclude finance and accounts, which does the business of finance, all the other business functions, and I call it business function. Let's understand that our organization is into the business of impact. It's not into the business of, it's into a business of accountability. It's in the business of service delivery. It's not in the business of profit, but it is into a business. So as long as we do not start thinking of the principles of business, we will not be able to have a very long-term future for ourselves. So program people, communications people, advocacy, okay, public relations, training, I think I've included everybody, research, okay. Uh, then new business is basically fundraising. Admin is sometimes part of accounts and finance, sometimes it is separate. And HR, oh, I have not put HR there. So HR is also one of the business functions. Sometimes the HR function is in the finance accounts function. It all depends. So these are the functions, and you will see every staff in every of these functions is performing a finance role because he or she is dealing with resources. The previous slide which we saw is resources. Now, if you say I don't deal with resources, I'm not going to buy that argument because as we are progressing towards in our journey in this particular session, we are seeing that we are dealing with a programmer is dealing very much with material. A programmer is dealing very much with human resources, and these are financial resources. You can put a finance tag to each of these resources. I'm not saying an HR is a finance resource, but there is a finance cost for that HR. That is how you have to understand. And for that HR, whatever is the finance that we have paid, how efficiently we are using that finance resource to generate output. And the more output you generate with that finance HR resource, the more effective you will be in delivering impact. That is how you have to look at. So these are some of the functions that are there. And we now move on to this so-called finance and accounts function. Now आप सब कहीं कहीं पे होंगे, चाहे ट्रेनिंग में, चाहे रिसर्च में, एडवोकेसी में, पीआर के अंदर, fundraising के अंदर, wherever you may be, no problem. Now you have to say, or primarily program. Now you have to see what finance function is actually. Okay. So this is how we will now move on to what is the concept of financial management. Now I'm taking you to the crux of the matter. Now, what is financial management and what is the finance function? ये दो अलग-अलग चीज है. Financial management is a management function which deals with finance, okay? And the function that deals with financial management is called the finance function. ऐसे समझो. Financial management is a business process, and the function in your organization, here you are, the finance and accounts function is the finance and accounts function that is dealing with financial management. Financial management is a process, is a function that deals with planning, organizing, monitoring, and controlling financial resources. Just as program management is what? Planning, organizing, monitoring, and controlling uh, program delivery of a program or the program delivery for the organization. Both of them are very critical. Financial management is one of the critical functions, just as program is. And therefore, I always say all other functions are support functions The primary functions in an organization are program, and I always say program first, and then finance. And these two, if you are looking at organization like a cart, the two sides of the wheels of the two wheels of this cart, and one and the cart cannot move with just one wheel. Okay, please remember this. So both of them are part of the same card, and the card cannot move without. Now, that Excel may have other functions, but the two wheels are program and finance, and that Excel that is connecting may have communication, research, training, all of them, HR, and all of them I consider as supporting finance and program, okay, in a certain sense. And therefore, they will also have relationship with you. But primarily, the program and the finance functions are the functions that run an organization. I'm not underestimating any other support function, not at all. Okay. Sometimes we call the program function as the function of an organization and even finance as a support function. That's not the case. Let's not understand it that way. Not because I am a finance person, but because I understand that these are the two key functions in an organization which will run this cart. Otherwise, the cart cannot run. Now, this means that you have to plan for finances, and we will see each of these things. We have to organize finances, which means allocation of resources. We have to monitor whether plan and organizing is properly. Again, the function of performance is capturing the data and controlling. Again, the word internal control or control framework. तो अगर आप ये वर्ड्स मैंने जो पहले आपको बताए थे वो समझ गए हैं, तो आप each of these four words that are there as part of the definition of financial management, you will be able to read what includes in planning, organizing, monitoring, and controlling of the financial resources of an organization. Okay. Uh, so the financial resources are directly related to social impact. Please remember, because when we talked about economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, we talked about finance being the central point for all this. So the financial management, if it is efficient in an organization, the impact that that organization is going to create in society in terms of social impact will be maximum. Therefore, best or best quality of financial management is required to deliver maximum social impact. Let's understand that. And who are the people who are holding the social impact? The program people. But you have the finance people also ensuring efficient financial management. Now, why efficient financial management? Why? Because we are accountable. We are accountable. So I've always said that our social impact is the concept of accountability. Okay. Accountability, what is the meaning of accountability? That our work for the work that we are doing, we are accountable to the beneficiary. That is why I've said accountability to donors and communities. Why accountability to donors? Because they have given the money. Accountability to the community because for those people the money has been given. So the donors has given the money for those people. That's what is the differentiation between for profit and not for profit. The for profit accountability is only for the product, but for maximization of profit because they are not serving the donors, they are serving people who are called shareholders. Those shareholders want maximum profit. Okay, here the donors look at maximum social impact, and the communities are the one who are consuming your services. Why? Because we have to improve the conditions of the community. Now, that accountability is what has to be demonstrated through good financial management. अगर आपके organization में financial management नहीं होगा, how will you show accountability? How will you show the numbers to prove accountability in terms of the use of financial resources? You might be able to show accountability in terms of program, but whether the program was delivered in terms of financial accountability, only financial management will be able to show. Transparency means like a mirror, like a like a like a can you see everything see through? You know, when you have a glass, you can see through the glass. So financial management ensures that anybody, whether it's the community, whether it's the donor, whether it's government, whether it's statutory bodies, are able to see your transaction in and out through that glass. And that is what is called transparency. Now, if transparency is demonstrated, then everybody, all these stakeholders that I have mentioned, will consider my organization very good in terms of financial management. That is what is the difference between accountability, transparency, and a good financial management is required for ensuring accountability and transparency. Now, accountability and transparency is also for profit, but there is a different orientation or motivation. That is what I'm saying. Now, second thing is allocation of financial resources for the organization. So the financial management function is primarily responsible for getting the money, ensuring that the money is allocated based on the contracts or based on the plan that has been done. Okay. So the allocation of resources is the responsibility of financial management. Allocation of resources, if the money is available and is surplus, then the investment of that money has also to be done by the management so that you can get maximum return on those financial resources. Now that's not your job, but it's the job of the financial manager. Why? Because with the existing resources that you have, not only in terms of delivering impact, but also in terms of getting maximum advantage during the time that you don't need the money, that money can be invested and you should get maximum benefit, maximum financial return so that you can use that money for other things also. Statutory regulatory compliances is what is the reason for financial management. Are we following the rules, the laws of the land is something that the financial management has to ensure. Next is financial reporting to stakeholders. Now, just as you submit program reports, the financial management function of this organization has to submit financial reports. You understand that? And sometimes we are not mindful of those financial reports. We think financial reports is not our headache. But for the donor, the financial and program reports have to be are seen together. And therefore, unless there is samanjasya or good relationship, amicable understanding between program and finance, our program reports and our finance reports will not be considered very good. So what I try to say is that the financial reporting to the stakeholders must also have input from programmers, and the program report must also have some kind of consultation with finance people in terms of their financial report, so that there is good quality of narrative and financial report put together. Now, to various stakeholders, the financial reporting is not just to donors; it's also to government. It's also to the public at large. The financial reporting is to public at large in terms of your financial statements. The statements that tell the public at large about the financial health of your organization. That's the session number 3 that we will study. So there is reporting to be done, and there is a certain way in which the reporting has to be done for the stakeholders to understand and to see whether the health of this organization is improving, is it deteriorating, is it still the same. That is what financial management does. So in a certain sense, the financial management is the custodian. Now you can see how they are the custodians of the finance. They are not using the finance. They are the people who are the monitors of finance. They are the monitors of finance, not the users of finance. But they are supposed to be monitors, and they are supposed to be penalized if they don't do the monitoring, controlling properly, if they don't do the planning properly, if the organizing or the resource allocation is not done properly. That is their job. Okay, they don't use the financial resources is what I want to again and again insist. The last one is futuristic planning. Now, financial management is responsible for futuristic planning. Why? Because the future holds our growth and sustainability. Okay. So the long-term growth, long-term financial security, sustainability of our organization. Do we look at our organization running for 2 years or 3 years that we have a program or a project? No. We have to plan for the financial security for several years. And that kind of thinking is brought in by by financial management. So, what is the financial security? How should we move on financial security? How do we look at long-term growth? How do we look at sustainability? From where should we get the resources? How should we budget? How should we put some money in the budget for our long-term sustainability? All that is the function of financial management. So you can understand what financial management does in an organization. Next is internal controls framework is the responsibility of financial management. Why? Because without a framework, the organization doesn't have hands, legs, ears, eyes, brain. We are the brain of that organization. And the brain that we have is creating a framework within which all of us should be internally bound or controlled. So फाइनेंशियल मैनेजमेंट इज ऑल्सो रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इंश्योरिंग द फ्रेमवर्क. अगर हमको बैंकिंग करनी है, अगर हमको पैसे खर्च करने हैं, अगर हमको एचआर को खरीदना है, टैलेंट एक्विजिशन करना है, तो क्या कंट्रोल फ्रेमवर्क है उसके अंदर करना है? क्या हमको उसको परफॉर्मेंस अप्रेजल करके बेनिफिट देना है? तो क्या हमारे पास कॉम्पेंसेशन का ब्रेकडाउन है? क्या प्राइस पे बैंड्स हैं? क्या जॉब डिस्क्रिप्शन है? All that is the internal control frameworks. You suddenly cannot, as a person X in that organization, say, no, no, sir, I think I should give him this. No, you cannot, because the financial management, because that is a matter of finance, and the financial management is responsible for bringing in that internal controls. Internal controls, we will see in the last session, and then you will understand that internal controls is trying to bring down the risk that the organization has. Without controls, we are exposed to risk. तो रिस्क और कंट्रोल एक कार्ड के दो साइड हैं, जैसे प्रोग्राम और फाइनेंस. So if you have risk and you have good controls, then you will lessen the damage of risk. Okay, that's what I will say at this stage. Custody of financial resources, very very clearly you know that. So if custody का मतलब है, finance person will be responsible अगर anything here hanky panky happens. So the finance function has to keep its third eye, Trinetra, open all the time to see that the financial resources are protected of that organization. That's the role of financial management. It has to keep its third eye open all the time to see that there is no misuse, no overuse, no diversion. I don't want to use these words. What I'm trying to say is, in the positive side, they are holding the money. You are not holding the money. Now, that holding the money, they are holding the money, you are using the money. Now, see, good relationship. Now, unless the one who's holding the money knows how the use is to be done, and the one who's using the money, how we have to hold the money, otherwise our organization can be endangered. Unless we understand each other, that organization cannot become great. So the custody, the bank operations, the cash operations, the operations relating to fixed asset, the custody of inventory, the return of inventory, the custody of the accounts book, the custody of your statutory requirement, all is with you. But वो क्या जा रहा है उन books के अंदर is something that you are doing is getting captured, and your actions will affect the way they are able to do the custody. Better decision making on finance, basically because they understand the language of finance. Now when I am mentioning this, fulfill the mission based on data and analysis. All financial decisions have impact on our mission of this organization. Our mission stands for doing this, okay? And our vision is to fulfill the mission through these objectives. Now, the finance is the key thread in that mission and vision. So these people are good in financial decision making, or they are experts. You are not an expert in financial decision making, but you have to take the financial decision and take advantage of this financial experts in financial decision making. But the financial decisions are being made by you, and therefore the need to understand finance. Enhanced credibility and trust. Now, if you have good financial management, then it will give you a better edge. Now, you all know that bigger organizations, why are they having a competitive edge? Because their controls, their reporting, their financial management is good. So if the financial management is good, you will have a competitive edge versus your other organization. Why is it that some organizations get more money? Is because of their financial management being very, very robust, their compliance is being very high. So the institutional part of it is actually the institutional strengthening is measured by financial management. And wherever financial management is strong, the institutional strengthening is strong. And you will have an advantage over your competitors. Oh, okay, there is a competition for money. Okay, remember, just as for profits have to compete for their product, for delivering services, you have to compete with other organizations. Okay, let's understand this. We are into business. So if your financial management is strong, you will have a better advantage, what we call as better equity to get money. Managing risk through internal controls. So this is the two sides of every financial management. There is always a risk to the financial resources and there is controls that are required. Who manages the risk? The finance function manages the risk because they have defined the internal control. The next is meeting organizational goals. So that is basically the mission of the organization. The reason for the objective for which the organization has been set up is what at the top level is also fulfilled by the financial manager. So you now can see that the finance role is very, very broad. It helps our organization to exist, grow, and be sustainable. Now coming to what is the function. Now coming from, so we have understood what financial management is. Now we are trying to understand what does our finance function do. Okay. So the finance function in a not-for-profit, okay, is dealing with the financial health of and sustainability. Finance function is the function which deals with financial management, which the financial health and sustainability. Now, the finance role, functions role is the same as financial management, but I have concised it into six functions that the finance function does. Manages financial resources, very nice. Makes strategic financial decisions for the future, right? We have seen that. Operational support. So the finance function is supporting all function, including your function, but it is upholding internal controls and also telling all the functions that you have to abide by internal controls. That is the operation support. Now, that is one of the objective for our session, which is point number 3 in our objectives, that our interface. So finance function is supporting operational functions and all other functions, whether it's communication, whether it's new business or fundraising, all those functions are being provided support by the finance function. Now we have to understand where the finance function is coming and what is the internal controls that they are asking rather than fighting. Then only our relationship will be better. So the finance function primary role is to support all the functions that we have just seen. Report to stakeholders, okay, for decision making. So the stakeholders will be donors, government, anybody, okay, and they are taking decisions for our in relation to our organization. What reports donors are reading, what decision making they are doing? They are doing the decision making whether to again support this organization through another program and grant. What are the decisions that the government is doing, whether to take any action based on that report, whether they have not fulfilled the statutory or regulatory provision. Okay, that is what is the report that they have to generate. The financial reports is the function of the finance department. And these reports are very important because all the people, all the stakeholders who are dealing with us will take decisions based on these reports. Compliances with the laws, income tax, FCRA, social security, CSR, all those laws that are there, you have to comply with those. GST, for instance, if that is applicable to you, All those laws are statutory laws which have to be complied by the finance function. That's their primary responsibility. The next one is managing risk. Okay. And I said internal controls. Now, point number two, you can also read internal controls, uphold internal controls. So they will keep telling all the functions, well, please, these are the internal controls, these are the policies and procedures, this is the framework. Why we want to uphold these internal controls and want you to follow the internal controls is because we want to reduce the overall risk for this organization. In a for-profit organization, the risk is the number one enemy. It has still not been understood by not-for-profits, but the not-for-profits is understanding that we need to manage risk, otherwise our shop will close. So these are the six key functions of finance in an organization. But we will see them in three buckets soon. The difference between accounts and finance, I'm talking only of finance. But when we talk of accounting and finance function, there is a distinction between accounting and finance. Accounting is more historical, meaning whatever we have done, we are collating that, summarizing that, and keeping that information available. So accounting is looking back. Whatever has happened, you are looking back and compiling that, summarizing that, recording that so that that data is available. But the finance function is looking forward, looking in the future, using that data to make financial decisions. So while I'm not undermining accounting function, the finance function is the key function which is the forward-looking function. And that is the distinction between accounting and finance. I mean, you might ask your accounting and finance people, what's the distinction? They may not be able to tell you. But what I'm trying to, in easy fashion, tell you is that accounting is more in terms of whatever has happened in the past that needs to be recorded in your account books, that need to be summarized in forms of report, that need to be reported in terms of, any reporting that needs to be done. But with that data, accounting data, all the decisions that you will do in terms of budgeting, in terms of your financial statements, is coming from accounting, but you are doing value addition in the finance function. That is the distinction between accounting and finance. And when we are dealing, we'll be dealing with the finance function primarily. So where are we coming from? We are now coming from the point of, and please remember, every slide has a connection. So we are coming now to understanding what is it that the finance folks do, and I have tried to bucket them into three parts for ease of understanding. और ये तीन पार्ट्स जो हैं या तीन बकेट्स जो है ना, ये पूरी फाइनेंस फंक्शन की स्टोरी आपको तीन बकेट्स में बता देता है. It tells the story in these three kind of compartments. One is what is called enabling value creation. Second is what is called shaping value creation. And third is narrating value creation. Now you can understand value creation मैंने नीचे लिख रखा है. What is value creation for an NGO? It's basically social output or social outcome, and finally social impact. You understand the difference between output, outcome, and impact. I don't have to say that. Those are all at various stages. So you have outputs which are tangible. Those tangible outputs result in a certain purpose or outcome. And long term, when those outcomes are, you know, consistently repeated, that creates impact. Okay. So when you make your log frame, you make your input activities, all right, your input activities and presumptions or, assumptions about them. You then say with these inputs, and that log frame is nothing but a process. Efficiency, the word efficiency. So the input is what is whatever it is, and the input will result in an output. That is the out. That is the end result of the process is your output. अगर आप लोग log frame समझते हैं तो, या आप प्रोग्रामिंग के बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट समझते हैं तो, now the output will help you to achieve your purpose or your outcome, because the program has an outcome. It's not output. Tangible output तो कुछ ना कुछ होगा, बट उस tangible outcome से, output से, behavior के अंदर क्या change आएगा, that is your outcome. And when that behavior change repeatedly happens, it will bring about long-term impact of that program in the society in terms of the behavior that we want to be changed. That's the relationship. Now, value creation एक organization के context में आउटपुट आउटकम एंड इम्पैक्ट को कैसे improve करा जाए, हाउ डू वी क्रिएट दैट वैल्यू इज व्हाट इट इज and that you do with the finance. So I am saying the finance function enables that value creation. It is helping, it is creating that framework. Second is it is shaping it because that framework has been created. Now we need to see whether that framework is being adhered to, and therefore that is the shaping. And third is that you have to report whether you are creating that value creation, that whether that value creation is happening, that is how you are narrating. Because the finance function has to also report or to tell the outside world where whatever enabling work we did, whatever shaping work in terms of monitoring or checking or assessment or validation we did, now we are reporting to you, yes, we did that value creation. Now the value creation is the end result of the program people with the use of finance. समझ गए? This is what uh, I want to say. Now, the role as far as finance is concerned is with the CFO and the team in finance, uh, but duly monitored by the governing body. So the finance function is generally headed by the CFO and the finance team. It might also have the accounts team, but the finance people are more critical people because the accounts people are the recording people, but they are all part of the accounts and finance team. So remaining now, these are in chronological order as I have mentioned. Means first you have to enable value creation. Finance वाला क्या करता है? Enable करता है value creation. Value creation कौन लाता है? Program वाला लाता है. Value creation का क्या मतलब होता है? We have seen that. Now, the enabling, shaping, and narrating is a concept that I have brought in. And when you will understand these three concepts in a chronological, means one follows the other, then you will understand the full dimension of the finance function. So let's get into enabling value creation. Now, what are the things that the finance function does in enabling ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को इनेबल करना? बिकॉज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अपने से नहीं कर सकता. यू आर इनेबलिंग द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन टू ब्रिंग अबाउट वैल्यू, टू क्रिएट वैल्यू, to demonstrate value in terms of social impact. But that value को लाने के लिए what are the framework, what is the structure is that the finance function does? I have put them into four parts as far as enabling is concerned. One is called planning. So we saw financial management first function was planning. Now, how does the enabling value creation? First part is planning. Financial resources have to be planned. How will the financial resources come? Okay. Then second thing is how will the financial sustainability happen? So you have to all the time look at financial sustainability or long-term growth or futuristic planning. That is the function of the finance department. So these people are the ones who have to tell the board, who have to work with the board and say, how will our financial security be ensured in the long term? And for that, they have to plan. They have to also plan for current operations in terms of the resources for the organization, because the organization cannot run with financial resource without financial resources. So the planning of financial resources presently, as well as securing and the security of organization in terms of future financial resources is the planning part. The third is again controls. So they have to plan controls. Okay. So the control is nothing but the policies and procedures. We call them PMPs. They are nothing but the internal control framework. Those are the policies and procedures that they plan. तो आपने देखा होगा finance policy, risk management policy, conflict of interest policy, even the travel policy, sometimes even the HR policy because it has financial implications are all planned by the finance function. These are generated by the finance function. Do you design the finance policy? No, because the finance function understands the language of finance. They have to plan the framework, and the framework is their job. Monitoring and controlling the framework is being followed is their job, but who follows that framework? Everybody follows that framework, including the finance people. But everybody means program, communication, research. Nobody can say I'm beyond the control. So they need to plan the control. So finance ko plan karna and controls for operating the organization is something that is the planning function. This is enabling. So if you were to start your organization today, is your enabling function that you have to first fix before you do shaping, means monitoring, checking, and telling the world. That is number three. So first function is the enabling the value creation. That's the planning function. So understand how critical this planning function is. The second, within the plan, within your planning, how to get sustainability, how to do your financial management, resource management at this time is what is called forecasting. Now, forecasting can be long term and short term. In a certain sense, forecasting is a part of planning, but the planning is something which says, ye karna hai. Forecasting says, ye estimation hai. That's the distinction. But then, in a certain sense, forecasting is within the fold of planning. But I've kept it separate for you to understand that once you have decided that you have to plan financial resources, you have to estimate those financial resources. How do you do that? You do that through budgeting. अब आया कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ बजट. ओके, अब कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल्स हमने देखा प्लानिंग के स्टेज के ऊपर है, इसलिए हमको ये समझ आया दैट द कंट्रोल्स इज वेरी क्रिटिकल और सेंट्रल टू आवर enabling this organization to work and to create value. इसलिए मैंने ये जान पूछ के ये थ्री वर्ड्स सिलेक्ट किए हैं. And every word, the enable, the shape, and the narrate will then collapse into your finance function. And then you also keep reading and thinking that where are you? You are all the time somewhere there. Okay, you are all the time somewhere there. And that is why I say you are always wearing the finance hat. At some time you are wearing the finance hat, sometimes you are wearing the program hat, sometimes the more the program hat, sometimes more the finance hat, but basically that's a dual role that you are performing. And as you are moving with me, you will understand that you are doing this function whether you like it or whether you dislike it, whether you ignore it, that's your choice. But then you are always there, and at the end your performance is also measured by how good you were in finance. The forecasting that we am talking about is the estimation for delivering our plan of financial resources. ये है समझो. So what the budget means, we will do that budget next session. Grant management, we will do a separate section on budgeting. So budget is nothing but estimating how much income we will get, that is the financial resources, how much will be our expenditure for that particular program and for that organization. So the budget is both for organization as well as for grant projects. Understand? So the program projects will have budget, and the organization for other than the program budgets will also have a budget, and the two put together will be the organization budget. Now, budget is an estimation. The second thing forecast is the fund flow. The distinction between budget and fund flow is budget is an estimation. Fund flow is actual. This much money will come, this much money will have to be spent. That is what is called fund. So the budget is an estimation, the fund is an actual. Both are in monetary terms. Okay, so the budget will be income and expenditure estimation. The fund flow will be inflow and outflow of money. That is how it is captured. And the operating cash means, the actual cash that will come and go. So within the fund flow, how much will be the cash and how much will be other resources is something that is part. So the actual cash, hard cash will be your operating cash requirement. on a day-to-day basis. So the operating cash will be part of the fund flow, but it will be for a shorter period of time. Understood? So this is the forecasting function of enabling the value creation of the finance function. तो हमने पहले देखा प्लानिंग, हमने अब देखा फोरकास्टिंग, because the forecasting in terms of budgeting, fund flow forecast and the operating cash forecast will ensure that we will deliver on our plan. The third is bank resource allocation. अब हमारे हमने प्लानिंग किया, हमने फोरकास्टिंग किया, अब हमारे पास जब रिसोर्सेज आ गए तो उन रिसोर्सेज का एलोकेशन इज द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द फाइनेंस फंड. Did we not see when we were seeing the slide on the role of finance? They manage finance. Now, what is the allocation of resources? Do you sit and allocate resources? No, the allocation of resources is the responsibility of the finance function. But for what the amount is once allocated, once the funds are allocated, who uses those funds? It is you who uses it. So what are the some of the areas of resource allocation in terms of how money will be moving? That is the banking function. So the banking in terms of resource allocation, cash management in terms of resource allocation is the responsibility of finance. Treasury means investment. If you have surplus money, how will you deploy that money to get maximum returns is what is called treasury and cash management. Now, the other thing is allocation of money for human resources, all right, for manpower, allocation of resources for goods and services, which are procured as per policy. So program goods, for program manpower, for services that we might need to hire. Who allocates the resources? How does the money finally reach these people? It is done by the finance function. And what facilitates that allocation? The banking function, the cash management function. That once it is set up will help the allocation of resources for HR, for goods and services, for vendors, for any kind of movement that will happen, it will happen through the banking route. But the allocation of resources based on what you have told them, who says this money has to go to this particular vendor because it has delivered the training, it has delivered the products. You are the final authority. And when we will see the product procurement of goods and services, that's where we'll see that. Inventory management, okay, is the responsibility of finance function. Asset management is the responsibility of finance function. While you use the inventory, you use the asset, they are the custodians of these, and therefore the resource allocation for purchase as well as the custody of these valuable resources for which allocation has been made is their responsibility. So we will see inventory management and asset management again in the procurement chapter. ये उनका काम है. तो क्या इन्वेंट्री खो गई, क्या असेट खो गया, वो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इनकी है. क्या इन्वेंट्री स्लो मूविंग है, was the inventory what has to be done with loss of assets, what has to be done with obsolete asset, what has to be done with outdated inventory, all that they have to see. And they have, since they are using that, they have to also see corrective action in case they are misusing, their funds are not being used optimally. Why? Because we have to use scarce resources for optimal output, outcome, and impact. The next one is recording. Now, this recording is the accounting function. So the in terms of enabling, ये resource allocation करने के लिए सारा setup करना है, और जितने transactions होते हैं उनको record करने के लिए भी आपको structure create करना है. That's what the enabling function is. So this is the framework or the structure setting up. Structure setting up. Now the recording function is bookkeeping, recording transactions. So the bookkeeping is basically the accounting function. Accounting of the bookkeeping means recording those transactions. Accounting function means the summarization, analysis, and interpretation of financial data. Basically, the accounting function is recording and summarizing and giving that data in some shape, giving data some shape. So you have Tally, you have other software which will help the recording of that raw data को record करके उसको एक particular shape में लाना और present करना is the recording function. So you'll have to set that up. How do you do that recording in your program function? You get the data raw from the field and you use the MIS software to convert it into valuable data on the basis of which you will take decision about communication, decision about training, about research, all that. Similarly, on the finance side, the accounting data is summarized, recorded, and converted into data which will help the finance people and the top management to take financial decision. Okay, closing and reconciling. So this is all more process driven. Why I've written it is because जो एलोकेशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेज हुआ है जिसके स्ट्रक्चर के बेसिस पे रिपोर्ट जनरेट होंगे you have to close the loop also. You have to reconcile the bank, you have to reconcile the vendor accounts, you have to reconcile the employee accounts, you have to reconcile the grant. Is the grant reconciling? If you got 100 rupees as grant, and if you have spent 50 rupees, 20 rupees as advances to vendor, for 30 rupees is in bank, is the can I see the 100 rupees today in my books is what is called grant reconciliation. That is something that is done by the finance people. So these are four functions of the finance people which will create that framework. Now moving on to shaping. अब ये framework बन गया. Framework क्या बना? Planning, forecasting, resource allocation, and recording. Once you have that, the machine will start working. Now the machine will start working, and the second function of finance, which is the shaping function, comes into play. Shaping function क्यों आएगा? Because now the machine has started working and you've started getting data. So what are the two, three things that these people now will shape the value creation? They will help in monitoring, controlling. This is the function now that is coming into shaping. First is performance measurement and management. What comes in performance management? Now you have started getting data. So you'll have to see whether you'll have to measure performance. How do you measure performance? You will have to do the budget monitoring. What is the budget variance? So whatever was the budget that was given, the allocation that was given, how much has been spent? This is the performance measurement. Now you are shaping or monitoring and controlling function of financial management. So you had planning, organizing, जो हमने देख लिया. Third is monitoring, controlling, and the fourth is reporting. That is the way financial management is, and this function is delivering like that. So I've compartmentalized them into three, and we are studying this. Budget monitoring, measuring value for money. So basically means economy. Value for money means, did we get value for money? Did we get the lowest cost for the money that we spent? Did we ensure the principle of economy? Did we ensure the principle of efficiency? All that. Then return. Now generally still we do not calculate return in terms of social return or social return on investment, but the concept of social impact and social impact audit and measurable values for social impact or return on impact and funding being linked to impact being delivered is slowly coming in. So the finance function will very centrally provide that data to validate whether the return on investment has been achieved or not. This point number C is some time away, but I want to bring that to your consideration because the social return on investment will be based on the impact or the outcomes that you have generated. Only then the SROI will validate whether the money invested or spent, whatever, has delivered the right social impact. तो सोचना शुरू करिए. Value for money is economy. For the same amount of 100 rupees, could you get more value or could you get the 100 rupees value in 80 rupees? That's value for money. And of course, how did you spend the money is the budget monitoring. We saw the forecasting part in our enabling value creation as the budget setup, but the budget monitoring is now being done in terms of monitoring and controlling. The monitoring controls. Now this is controlling function. The controlling function is in terms of monitoring, budget monitoring. Okay. तो पहले वाला तो परफॉर्मेंस को मेजर किया था, हमने सिर्फ मॉनिटर क्या किया था, बजट के अगेंस्ट में हम कहाँ हैं, दैट रिपोर्टिंग वी हैव डन. नाउ वी हैव टू डू बजटरी कंट्रोल. दैट मींस if we are not in line with the budget, then we have to do reallocation, realignment, changing the budget, talking to the donor. Okay, I think you understand these words, realignment and reallocation, which means we have to go back to the drawing board, we have to go back to the donor and say, well, our budgetary control is now asking us to take action. So what does control do? It helps us take action. Who helps this control? The finance function. Adherence to policies and procedures, ये responsibility है finance का. कौन को पॉलिसीज एंड प्रोसीजर्स को एडियर करना है? प्रोग्राम को. लेकिन कौन को ये चेक करना है? हु हैज टू चेक वेदर पॉलिसीज एंड प्रोसीजर्स आर बीइंग एडियर्ड टू? दैट्स द फाइनेंस फंक्शन. सो दैट्स व्हाट is shaping. Now, it might happen that as we move along, you might need changes in policies and procedure. So you shape your policies and procedures according to the change or the evolution that is happening. Audit and assurance again is monitoring. We will see that. Monthly MIS is again monitoring, because the monthly MIS will help you to do budgetary control. It will help you to take corrective action. Facilitation is again the monitoring control. Why I put it is because this helps other, this finance function does because it helps the other functions to also be in the discipline of policies and procedures, to help them understand and abide by those policies and procedures. So that's the move, that's the dynamic part. Once we have created the structure of enabling, now shaping might actually also require us changing our policies, changing our internal controls, changing our processes, and helping the other functions. Other functions might say this may not work. So we can change our policies, we can change our processes. That's something that the finance people will do. But this is a give and take relationship. The third one, so we have these two as shaping, basically measurement, and the second is controlling. First is monitoring and second is controlling. That is what I have put. What all do does the finance function do? The next one is narrating the value creation. Narrating का सिर्फ मतलब होता है reporting, talking to the outside world. So financial reporting is done by the finance function. Do we need to understand financial reporting? Yes, because we are the ambassadors, we are the torch bearer of the organization. No, no, sir, हमको तो finance समझ ही नहीं आता. You cannot say that. You should not say that. And if you say that, you are not giving the right message to the stakeholders. So the financial reporting is in terms of donors, in terms of government, in terms of the board. Why? Because the board is the governance structure which takes financial decisions. तो क्या फाइनेंस फंक्शन बोर्ड को फैसिलिटेट करेगा? यस, दे विल प्रोवाइड डेटा एंड इंफॉर्मेशन financial which is usable for decision making by the board for the long term sustainability. So that's the narration. You are narrating your story, you are narrating your financial health is what it is. It is the focal point. So the narration is also in terms of being the focal point with the external stakeholders. As just as you are the external stakeholders, they are also external stakeholders. Now, I am not reading out government agencies on CA, but you can read them. But we'll come to each of these. Don't worry. Okay. Now, this is what is the function. So the role of the non-finance people. Now, this is after understanding that what finance function does, क्या हम क्या करते हैं? So the non-finance people handle resources which have value. They have to deliver value for money. So the resource allocation is done by the finance people, but handling resources is by non-finance. तो क्या आप finance नहीं समझते? Non-finance staff ऑथराइज वेरियस टाइप्स ऑफ एक्सपेंडिचर. आप ट्रैवल ऑथराइज करते हो, प्रोक्योरमेंट करते हो, ऑफिस एक्सपेंडिचर करते हो, स्टैट्यूटरी ड्यूज जमा करते हो इन द फील्ड. आर यू नॉट डूइंग फाइनेंशियल डिसीजंस? You are authorizing, but your authorizing is being monitored by the finance. So there is this, the where it begins and where it ends. So there is somebody standing behind you to support you, not to just monitor you, to support you first, but also monitor you and to tell you you are not doing the right thing. Non-finance staff, they they are the owners and they operate the project budget. When I talk to some fine operations people, program people, and I say, who holds the budget? Who owns the budget? Who operates the budget? This budget has been prepared, forecasting किया है. When we saw forecasting, we saw budgeting, we saw fund flow estimation, we saw operating cash estimation. We saw all that. That's all right. That has been facilitated by finance. But once that has been done, वो project budget किसके हाथ में आता है? Who's the owner? So the owner and custodian are two separate people. You are the owner who will operate the budget, and the finance person is the custodian who's holding the budget and is supposed to ensure that as custodian the budget has been owned and operated by program person as defined in the contract and as per internal controls. Project decisions of non-finance people has financial implication in the field. Please understand this. Sometimes you don't understand, and because of that, the donors sometimes disallow some expenditure because you have done expenditure beyond what was mentioned in the contract. Many times the program people don't even read the contract. Many times the program people are doing program for which they don't even have the contract. Decisions in field of non-finance have compliance implication, and that I have already said. Compliance अगर आपको नहीं पता होगा तो sometimes you may be non-compliant because you've taken a certain decision which has compliance or non-compliance implication and you don't know that. Non-finance staff affect reputation. So brand equity, and that this is the last point that I want to tell you. आपके एक्शन से ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के फाइनेंस का रेपुटेशन, even the very existence of the organization is linked. And please understand, you have a very crucial role that way. So understanding that you have not done the right decisions in terms of finances, compliances in the field में आपको कोई नहीं बताने वाला है. लेकिन अगर आपको पता होगा, अभी ये 8 सेशन करने के बाद में आपके और ओरिएंटेशन होने के बाद में you will be better, clearer in terms of all that. Then probably in terms of handling, owning, implementing, compliances, and finally building the brand equity for your XYZ company, you will be the brand ambassador. Now, in all this, can you say that you do not do finance? So all the finance functions you are involved. And as we will move in grant management, procurement, financial statement, वो financial statement भी तुम्हारा ही करा हुआ है. वो तो सिर्फ finance वालों ने present किया है. But everything you have done. Now I come to the last slide where I just wanted to say, why do you not want to embrace finance? This is a negative slide and I don't want to do that. But why I have put this is because from next session onwards, we will understand with the assumption, work with the assumption that we are also a finance person. Today, our session will end with a conviction that we also are a finance person and we have understood what the finance role of that organization or the finance function is there and how we will collaborate, coordinate, and collaborate with each other. It's not just one way. It's not, I'm not saying that the finance people have to be hands off and say nothing doing with program. It is a joint effort. एक जो कार्ट होती है जो आप रूरल के अंदर देखते हैं, जो बुलक कार्ट होती है, उसमें अगर दो पहिए नहीं होंगे तो वो बुलक कार्ट नहीं चल सकती. दैट्स व्हाट हाउ आई वांट यू टू विजुअलाइज. नाउ the non-finance people are frightened with numbers. Let me tell you, some of the top people in organization are programmers because they have embraced the finance numbers. Second is organization sometimes does not promote, the embracing of the financial information by the programmers. Now, this can be a culture issue, but we have to address this culture issue. Financial literacy, again, in terms of these kind of orientation that needs to be done of programmers. Very important. Very limited bandwidth organizations have, and I think it's a very good initiative that we are trying to help you to see the other side. Let's understand the other side of the picture also for the person. Okay, उस पार भी देखिए. Look at the other side also, for which you need for which organizations should devote time and resources for financial literacy. If you're not financially literate, how will you even know about finance? Non-involvement in budgeting process. So when you are doing budget and when we'll do grants next time, you will understand that unless the program folk and the finance folk together sit and not sit in silos or compartments, you will never have a good grant contract. So budgeting ke andar 100% involvement of the program, how it has to be done, why should it be done, we'll see in the next slide. And the last is capacity building. There is lack of capacity building for the non-finance people, such orientation. Now मैं ये सेशन आपको सिर्फ रील आउट कर सकता था, 5 चीजें 4 चीजें, and we would have covered it and said, well, that's the end. How we have tried to connect from one string to the other, and assuming and making me understand first how you would be able to understand it, and that's how we have made that presentation. I hope you have understood this presentation. It's not a very lengthy presentation. With that, I close the session, and you know, Indranil, if there are any questions in the chat, we can take, or if people want to unmute and ask, they can.
So there are a few questions that we have. So the first question is from Tanima. She's asking that what sort of inputs can be expected from, or we are looking for, the program team on financial reports, utilization certificates, or the financial statements.
No, no. So I just want to tell you, Tanima, that we are helping the program people through this, course in terms of understanding the finance. So yes, you will understand what utilization certificates are. You will understand financial statements also. So our effort through this particular initiative is to help you understand the various aspects of finance in a very simple fashion. Once you understand this, then you will understand that you are just not a programmer, but you are part of a bigger team which has to also do finance. That is what we are trying to tell. I hope I'm answering that.
So
What is the limit?
the next,
I'll do that. So what
okay.
is the limit? What is the limit for creation of corpus fund uh, under?
Uh, the question was related to the FCR corpus fund. Is
Uh-huh.
there any limit of creation of corpus fund under FCR?
So, first of all, I just want to tell you, and we'll see that in the overview. Very good question. I think somebody understands what he's asking. In FCRA, the FC money is for a specified purpose or for a specified program. That is either a cultural program, economic, social, educational, or religious. The money in FCRA should not be for corpus, because the corpus money is not for a program, and FC money has to be for a purpose. Now, what has happened in organization is that they have got corpus money, and the FCRA is saying this corpus money cannot be continued. You will have to liquidate this corpus money and implement it for any particular program. And in future, all FCRA money should be for specific purpose. It should be for a specific purpose. So corpus is something which is not encouraged by FCRA. There is no time limit, but in audit reports by the FCRA department, they are saying we will give you this much time, or they might give you this much time in terms of liquidating that corpus. So corpus is something which is not a purpose or an approved purpose under FCRA law. We will see that. Any other question?
No, sir. In chat box, we have not received any other question. So we can take two questions, so participants can unmute and ask the question directly. Okay, so I don't think there is any more question coming up for this session. So thank you participants for joining to the first session, and thank you Sharad sir for such an insightful session with a broad overview that what we are trying to cover in the next seven sessions, along with overall what will be the outcome and the output of this particular course. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody. I would urge that please stay with us for the 8 weeks. You will be benefited. I can only tell you, And my way of explaining to you is very, very simple because I understand you. Okay. I'm not a consultant as an external consultant. I am an internal consultant for you basically. So I will teach only something that I would think will interest you. Thank you very much.